It worked was the very first book, what I wrote when I was, I tried to write when I was 14. I thought I'd written a novel, and then discovered that they did a thing called a word count. There are loads called freehold jotters, freehold exercise books, full of words, full of writing, and quite small writing as well. There's only about 30,000 words, which I understand about half a novel, a novella or novelette. I can never work those terms out. Yeah, I did find the right one when I was 16. I wrote a novel. And it's quite long, though, 140,000 words. I was already going for quantity around quality. Give me a good step while you're looking for it, do. That was a spy story, full of sex and violence, neither of which I had any experience of at 16 whatsoever. Still not sex. He's strong, Iain. Yeah, so that was it. Had the snappy title of The Hungarian Lift Jet. Pauses for effect. Listen for gas. I know. Yeah, Hungarian Lift Jet. And then there's a novel called TTR, which is very influenced by both Catch-22 and Stand on Zanzibar by the late great Mr. Brunner. And it was kind of set in a very near future. It wasn't really at all science fiction, but a very near future. And there'd been a Sino-Soviet border war. The Americans had come in on the side of the Chinese. It hadn't gone nuclear. The Americans only came in because they hadn't had a war for a while and they tested its weaponry. Mongolia got taken over. The Chinese didn't want it. And so the Americans were going to incorporate Mongolia into the Union, the 51st state, and rename it Mongoliana. A kitchen sink drama, as you can tell. The title character was called Dahomey Brezhnev. Both badly spelled. His sidekick was Dogheart Gamahari. The bad guy was Gropius Luckfoot, and his sidekick was called Toss Macabre. That was even funnier on the page, trust me.
So the silly names were there right from the beginning.
And then there was like three SF novels. Yeah, so the very long one was called TTR. And it was, I was 18, so that'd be 22 that was written. And then after that came three SF novels. And I think it was Use of Weapons, and then Against That Background. And then I'm not sure about that order, I think it was, yeah. Use of Weapons, That Background, and then definitely the last of the three was Prayer Again. But they're all very sort of crude first draft form. I had this bizarre idea that you'd send first drafts to a publisher, no matter how many mistakes they had, because they look at it and they go, well, you can't spell, but it's a good rough diamond, something, this boy's got something. No, bad idea. I could have written in green ink as well, both sides of the paper very small. That would have hardly made any more of it. Less likely to get published. Anyway, so I hadn't done any first drafts, and I was approaching the age of 30, which when you're like in your mid-20s is inestimably old, horribly old. Now, in later years, at the age of, say, to pluck an age from the air, 53. It doesn't seem very old at all. It's 30, still a stripling, nothing, mature. But at the time I thought, fuck, I'm going to be 30 and unpublished. So I thought I'd write a mainstream novel, because definitely I thought, some of the science fiction that certainly at the time was, you only got about 6 rejection letters, that was it. It hadn't occurred to me you could send it abroad or America or anything like that, so I was only sending the books that I was writing around London publishers, and there only were about 6 that published SF. Well, I'd managed to find everything else. I had an extensive collection of entirely paperbacks, so I could see who these hardback publishers had been. So I thought, at least when I write a mainstream novel, I'll get more rejection letters. This goes so far back that one of my rejection letters said, "Dear Mr. Banks, we quite enjoyed the novel. However, due to the current paper shortage," you can just fucking say you don't like it. Yeah, so that's why the Wasp Factory that came out then, and
that was your idea of mainstream, right?
It was, yeah. Oh dear, my voice went up several octaves there. Well, yeah, I mean, I was aiming for something a bit like Iain McEwan or Martin Amis, something like that, and the Wasp Factory was my attempt to do something in that, sort of movement, as it were. And yeah, I sent it to Jonathan Cape first, I think, as well. I think they certainly published one of those guys, if not both at the time. But I kind of had it in my head, they were the archetypal, so they often were the people that I've got a lot of Picador books I remember at the time. I liked the nice tall sort of format. That's Paladin, wasn't it? Anyway, sorry. Anyway, yeah, so I worked at the published a lot of good writers, so I thought I'll send it to them first. So the Wasp Factory, had this. But I think at the time, I had this big argument with myself. There was internal sort of argument. I had different, competing forces in my own head, and like the diehards, the science fiction diehards, were, damn it, man, you're a science fiction writer. Have the courage and convictions. How dare you think about writing this mainstream shite? Stick to it, lad. Come on, just keep going. Whereas the management speak, the suits were going, I hear what you say, but what we feel, you see, is by establishing a sort of, maybe I'll put it this way, bridgehead into publishing via the mainstream that allows the further forces of the science fiction to get in there, you see. And I think what annoying, of course, thing is that the emollient suits were actually right, is kind of the way it worked. But it meant that the Wasp Factory was basically written by someone who thought of themselves as a science fiction writer. And I think that was why it was Roger Payton, used to run Andromeda in Birmingham, about 6 months before Wasp Factory was published. And I was completely unknown, I never heard of me or anything. We went round, the Futura Roadshow it was called, I think Futura going to be publishing, would be publishing eventually. And he'd read the book, I think even perhaps a manuscript form. Roger wandered up and said, hello, you're a science fiction fan, aren't you? No, what did you tell? No, my secret's out. And he said he'd never, we hadn't read any, there hadn't been any interviews or anything at that point, but you could just tell from the Wasp Factory that I somehow liked science fiction. Interesting. But there was, I don't think there's any science fiction in it, but I half understood, what he meant, and somehow there was something vaguely similar. You could tell it was written by someone who liked science fiction. I don't. But then after that came Walk on Glass, and it had more sort of science fictional sort of tropes. Good word, thank you, Mr. Clue. Stuff in it basically, and then Bridge had even more. In fact, there's even a knife missile mentioned in the Bridge. But then it said to my publishers, Macmillan, my hardback publisher at the time, that I had written science fiction, and Baratheon had also written Consider Cleavers. It was written after a Wasp Factory, in very early 80s. And I wanted to publish that as well. So, but what happened, what basically the way it went was that after having established some sort of start of a career in the mainstream and putting little bits of science fiction into it, it started straying at the edges, and I don't think I could have got much more SF into the Bridge. At least one or two sort of magazines actually reviewed the Bridge as science fiction. So I was very cool with that, but so I couldn't have gone any further down that line in a sense. So it's like there's a Y shape to my so-called career. So that first bit, the first three novels, there's increasing amounts of science fiction. That they go in very different directions, and the science fiction becomes very science fictional. Consider Cleavers, three-legged aliens clutching gigantic laser guns.
Spaceship on the cover.
Yep. Oh yeah. That was kind of very very science fictional. Whereas I think some people had been expecting some sub-Ballardian sort of stuff, I think that's what they'd been expecting. And the mainstream went much more mainstream. The mainstream novel after that was Esplanade Street, which is purely set in reality. So yeah, that's kind of what's happened. I've always thought ever since it'd be nice to go back and do another kind of Bridge-like novel. I've now got the time to do it. I don't actually have to start writing it until October next year. Holiday. Yeah. So I've got lots of time to try, because the trouble with the Bridge was that it used up so many ideas, and there's I haven't written a short story since 1987, and I think in my more egotistical moments, I think there's an entire book's worth of short stories just in the Bridge. There's so many little vignettes, bits and pieces that could have, if they were taken out of the fabric of the novel, could have been turned into viable short stories. And there's an awful lot of ideas that were thrown at that book, and unusually stuck. So it needs an awful lot, and it's one of the truisms, being in any way creative, whatever. And it was in the broadest spirit of being creative, but being a scientist, whatever, is you do tend to do your best work when you're younger, and you have your best ideas when you're younger. But I think at my age, now, in the 50s, you might be a bit better at developing the ideas you do have. You'll have fewer of them. So it might take me quite a long run up to this next one. But I'm kind of hoping that I can maybe do something vaguely bridge-like, or somehow an amalgam of basically probably mainstream. It will effectively be a mainstream novel, but with science fictional bits in it. Maybe. Don't hold me to it, but that is kind of the plan. Maybe.